Trifles. Minnie's Decision to Kill Her Husband by Cheyenne Hux Gowers, English 1102, Professor Chauncey. Why Minnie Killed Her Husband. In the play we find that Miss Wright is being investigated for the death of her husband. We come to find out what kind of man Mr. Wright was and why I feel that she was justified in killing him. We find evidence for her reasoning that I will go in further depth later in the presentation. We don't get much evidence from Miss Wright herself, but I think her actions speak of abuse and isolation and a wild desperation to free herself from the chains that she was bound to for so long. That is where we will begin the analysis of the evidence. Evidence. Mr. Wright is found dead in his bed with a rope around his neck. Conclusion is that he was strangled to death while he slept. Miss Wright doesn't give any reason to why he is dead, just the fact that she found him that way. Miss Hale explains to Miss Peters what kind of man Mr. Wright was while they are collecting items to take to Miss Wright in jail. Miss Hale and Miss Peters then stumble upon a dead bird that was found among Miss Wright's sewing and ultimately find what they think is the reason that she killed her husband. Miss Hale and Miss Peters decide not to tell the men of this and effectively save Miss Wright from spending the rest of her life in jail, or so it seems that way. Questions. The questions we are left with is why exactly do the women feel the need to keep this a secret, and why do they feel a need to save Miss Wright from a lifetime in prison? Why did Miss Wright kill her husband, according to the testimony of Miss Wright and Miss Peters? Was the fact that they kept this a secret justified? Analysis of the evidence at hand. This is the analysis of Mr. Wright's character according to Mrs. Hale. Miss Hale. Not having children makes less work, but it makes a quiet house, and Wright's out to work all day, and no company when he didn't come in. Did you know John Wright, Miss Peters? Miss Peters. Not to know him. I've seen him in town. They say that he was a good man. Miss Hale. Yes, good. He didn't drink and kept his word as well as most, I guess, and paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Miss Peters, just to pass the time of day with him, like a raw wind that gets to the bone. Trifles Play, Glaspell, page 1160. These are the words of Mrs. Hale to Mrs. Peter of the character of Mr. Wright.